We have an update on the investigation into the brawl after All Out and one possible party being uncooperative and threatening legal action, which may be delaying the return of several of the AEW stars that are currently suspended to the company. Saraya has been cleared by AEW to wrestle. We've got all of the details on that. Speaking of details, we've got more of them when it comes to Andrade and Sammy Guevara, their fight this past Wednesday at the Dynamite tapings that saw Andrade get sent home from the tapings. Speaking of Dynamite, we have the latest ratings from Wednesday's 3-year anniversary episode on TBS. Bandido, what's going on with him? Conflicting reports about his status with the company. Tony Khan, who does he bounce his creative ideas off of? And Jeff Hardy, when is he set to return to All Elite Wrestling? Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. And this is going to be a jam-packed show today, folks, because we've got a lot of AEW stories to get into. Let's get straight into it. Let's get straight into the latest details when it comes to CM Punk, Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, Nick Jackson, and Ace Steel after that brawl, after All Out, after CM Punk's comments in their now infamous post-show media scrum. And we may know now why things are taking a while, and it's as I suspected in the past. When I spoke about this in the past and I said, why were all of these people still suspended? Why initially were the producers suspended? It was because of a threat of legal action and AEW doing their best to protect themselves against any possible legal action further down the line. And it would appear right now potential legal action is what is holding up this investigation into what actually happened post All Out in Chicago a couple of months ago. Now, more information has now emerged regarding the backstage incident between CM Punk and the All Elite Wrestling EVPs after All Out 2022. Now, on September 4, CM Punk was allegedly involved in a fight with Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and his former tag team partner, producer of AEW television, also his longtime trainer, friend, confidant, Ace Steel, after giving an interview, a now infamous interview where he ranted and raved and spoke negatively about people in the AEW roster, etc. After he gave that interview during the post-show media scrum in which he insulted several key members of the company. Now, all those involved in the brawl were suspended by the company for an indefinite period of time. None of those directly involved in the fight have since appeared on AEW television since the event. As I mentioned, several producers such as Brandon Cutler, Pat Buck, Michael Nakazawa, Christopher Daniels, etc. They were suspended by the company for just being in the room at the time whilst AEW tried to get a handle or try to figure out some of the details as to what was going on or what went on. They've all subsequently returned to AEW and AEW television, but those key principal parties, CM Punk, Ace Steel, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, they've still been largely absent from AEW television. Well, they've been absent from AEW television. They are still suspended and they have not appeared on television since the incident. But according to Dave Meltzer in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, a resolution to the incident is some way off. It still may take time due to the legal ramifications of the situation. This is what Meltzer had to say, quotes, "We've been hearing a decent amount about it in the past week, largely that threatened legal action has stalled everything and nobody has been let go yet, including Ace Steel. There is no time frame for anyone to return at this point." Now, on the Wrestling Observer forum, Meltzer also stated, quote, "One person has threatened legal action and has been uncooperative. Now, it isn't clear at this time which party is being uncooperative and threatening legal action, it must be said. As I mentioned, other AEW personnel such as Christopher Daniels, Pat Buck, Brandon Cutler, and Michael Nakazawa were also suspended, but were ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing." So, obviously, this is going to lead to speculation as to who is this uncooperative third party or who is this uncooperative party and who is threatening legal action. Now, it must be said, allegedly, before I say the things, allegedly, but I think most people can come to a reasonable conclusion as to who this uncooperative party is. Most people can come to a conclusion as to the person who is threatening legal action. He is a person that has been fairly litigious in the past and has been involved in legal situations in the past. I think most people are coming to the conclusion that this uncooperative party, this person that is threatening legal action, would be CM Punk. Now, the reason I think people are coming to that conclusion is because, as I mentioned, the history have been fairly litigious, allegedly, in being involved in legal cases in the past. And also, it was reported, this isn't new information here, it was reported, I believe it was by Dave Meltzer, it might have been Sean Ross Sapp, it was one of these key wrestling journalists, pointed out that according to certain eyewitness accounts of people that were in the vicinity of the event or actually in the locker room trying to break things up, CM Punk reportedly was threatening legal action after the incident in question whilst they were still arguing, because if the eyewitness accounts and if the reports are to be believed, the Bucks and Omega enter the dressing room, the brawl happens, they get split up, but they're still arguing for several minutes there, and by all accounts CM Punk at the time was threatening legal action. So if you put two and two together, which you have to be careful sometimes, especially with this kind of stuff where you've got several different sides of an incident, and if anything, the real truth regarding all of it may never actually see the light of day. Nevertheless, you could put two and two together here and say, well, if reports are accurate at the time, he was threatening legal action. Several weeks later, what's holding up this investigation? What's holding up the return of the people that are actually physically able to return to television right now, i.e. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks? Well, potential legal action could prevent that from happening. And that's the situation. That's where AEW find themselves in, because let's face it, at this point, it's not difficult to figure out, because CM Punk, if he wanted to, couldn't return to AEW television right now. He's not medically cleared. He tore his triceps in the main event of All Out doing a tope suicida onto Jon Moxley. He tore his triceps. He's already undergone surgery, underwent it just days after the incident in question. He's out of action for 9 months. So even if CM Punk was unsuspended tomorrow, if the suspension was lifted, he couldn't appear on Dynamite. I suppose he could go in the ring and cut a promo, I guess, but he can't wrestle. He can't wrestle until late next year or until the middle of next year. When it comes to the other people involved, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, well, they're the ones that can. They're the ones that can actually appear on television tomorrow or tonight, live on Rampage, if they were able to do so, which they're not. They're not going to be on Rampage because they're still suspended. Granted, you could also say, from the perspective of a Kenny Omega or a perspective of the Young Bucks, particularly you would think Omega, if the reports again are accurate, Kenny Omega would have a really strong legal case of him being bitten and having his hair pulled. You know, that if he wanted to press charges or if he wanted to, go down the legal route in terms of, unsafe work environment or, assault, whatever it may be. I'm no legal expert here, folks. But, I would think that I would think everyone, this is the situation here. I would think everyone involved has a decent enough chance to take things further in terms of, legal action if they wanted to. CM Punk's, I would feel, if he were to, and we don't know if he is, but if it is Punk and he's threatening legal action, I don't know if he could say an unsafe work environment. I don't know if he could say, in terms of if he's fired. And then again, I think this is the issue. This is the crux of the issue, as I've speculated before. I think what's going on right now, and this is speculation, I don't have insider sources here, but my speculation is that everyone involved, CM Punk and Tony Khan mainly, are trying to figure out and negotiate an exit strategy from AEW. That would involve some sort of buyout of his contract, that would involve some kind of payoff, that would involve some kind of written agreement as to we're still going to pay you this, or we'll pay you this amount of money to leave, we'll buy out your contract, we'll pay up a lump sum of your contract, I guess. The issue is with that is that would be immensely expensive for AEW. CM Punk clearly is on the biggest contract in All Elite Wrestling, and he generates a lot of money for the company. He really does. He's the number one merch seller in AEW history, and I think he still is to this day, even though he hasn't been on TV for several weeks at this point. He still makes a lot of money, and he was still the headline attraction for two massive gates, two of the largest gates in AEW history. So, that's quite critical. And again, he will know his worth. And Tony Khan, whilst Tony Khan could believe, and maybe some AEW lawyers could believe, that they have grounds to fire CM Punk tomorrow, CM Punk could certainly dispute that. We don't know what contract he's got. CM Punk, as far as we know, he might have a no-cut contract, i.e. you can't let me go. I have it in writing, you can't let me go. There might be terms and conditions with that, gross misconduct, and then it's a case of AEW believing that he has acted in gross misconduct. We don't know. So those more technical finer details of the contract, they're key here. So CM Punk again could be threatening AEW saying, you can't fire me. If you fire me, I'll take you to court. I feel like I've got a good enough contract or a good enough case that I could win, and I could cost you way more money. So this whole situation is holding things up, and you could argue, well, why couldn't they just unsuspend the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and put them back on television? Because if they do, if CM Punk does take this further, he can then say, well, they were back on television straight away. They were treated differently. There was a preference towards these guys. They were treated more favorably than me. And when it comes to a jury and in a civil case, something could absolutely happen there, and that could absolutely look different. So I am sure that AEW and Tony Khan are being advised every single day about their legal perspectives here, and I think the way this gets resolved is AEW, Tony Khan buying out CM Punk's contract. I don't see him returning. But in the same vein, I don't see the Bucks and Omega then returning for a while. This would appear to be somewhat of a standstill at this point. And how it gets resolved, I'm not sure. But it's going to take a long time. And for the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, that's incredibly frustrating. And it just heaps on to more of the mess that's involved in AEW right now. It really does. Let's talk about Saraya. Saraya has been cleared. Yes, this is big news. This would be a story that I would prefer to lead with, in all honesty. But that legal situation when it comes to the Bucks and CM Punk is massive as well. But if it wasn't already clear, based on the latest episode of AEW Dynamite, it looks like AEW's latest signing is well on her way back to getting back inside the squared circle. According to the Wrestling Observer's newsletter's Dave Meltzer, Saraya has been medically cleared to wrestle once again. Now, this news comes just weeks after speculation as to whether or not the former retired wrestler would be able to get physical in AEW, or if instead she might serve as some kind of general manager role or managerial role or personality, etc. But it has been reported that the doctor who cleared Saraya for action is Dr. Michael Sampson, who of course is AEW's current ringside physician. Sampson had previously worked for WWE in the same position, and he is trusted on a weekly basis to ensure the safety of the performers. Now, Saraya, formerly known as Paige in WWE, had to retire due to a neck injury, and neck and back injuries that she suffered throughout her career, but she suffered a bad neck injury at the end of 2017. She was forced to retire in 2018, or announced her retirement in 2018. She has been very, very open that she wishes to return to in-ring action. She wants to follow the precedent set by wrestlers such as Bryan Danielson and Edge. And to be honest, this doesn't come as a surprise to me. I've seen a strange reaction to this one. I said, and this isn't a case of me saying I told you so, but the way she was presented on that very first appearance she had on the Grand Slam edition of Dynamite, it was very clear she was going to wrestle. Very clear in terms of the presentation she was given. The heels backed off like she could get physical. She was then put on the website and she had a win-loss record. Not that they mean too much nowadays in AEW, but she was presented as if she was going to wrestle. And I remember at the time, Dave Meltzer said in that week's edition of the Observer newsletter that as of a few weeks ago, she hadn't been cleared. And I said at the time, that means nothing. That means absolutely, that was a couple of weeks ago. Things change very quickly. We don't know if she was evaluated by AEW's medical team a couple of weeks ago. Maybe not. You know, so the fact that it's come out today that she's cleared, that's no revelation. She got physical this past week on Dynamite. And I believe it was reported by Sean Ross Sapp, previously of Fightful Select. The amount of money she's on, that's way too much money for a manager or a general manager to be on. AEW would have walked away from that deal because it would have made financial sense. When you're paying someone the level of pay she's getting, you have to get your money's worth. And that their money's worth is by having her do matches, having her as an attraction for an in-ring match. Now, obviously, this will lead to concerns about, you know, she might be medically cleared, but who knows what could happen. I would say in this instance, you have to trust the experts. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter that aren't experts, that aren't doctors, saying things like, oh, AEW, they've got a terrible medical team, the doctors don't know what they're doing. I would assume, and you have to in this situation, unless you are a doctor, unless you've seen Paige's neck, unless you have evaluated her, you have to put your trust in them because they're the experts ultimately in this situation. I can't sit here and say that what condition Paige's neck is in. It was bad enough that she had to retire. It was bad enough that when she was on her way out of WWE, she didn't have to. She wasn't cleared by their doctors. But, this is the thing with medical science, is that it's different perspectives. It's different perspectives. It's different opinions. I recall that for Bryan Danielson. Remember Bryan Danielson as well. When he couldn't get cleared by WWE, he went around to multiple doctors outside of WWE, and they all cleared him. It was only one doctor in WWE that wouldn't clear him, and it took to the point of him going around to like 10 different doctors, them all clearing him for WWE to clear him. So WWE, in terms of medical science, isn't the be-all and end-all, and medical science is always evolving. Of course there's concern, of course there's worry. When Sting came into AEW, I was dead against him wrestling because he was in his 60s and he had a bad neck. He appears to be fine. Edge, when he came back, the first few bumps he took, you got terrified, you were worried. But as I've mentioned too, one would assume if Saraya has been training for an in-ring return, the first bump she takes in her first match back won't be the first bump she's taken since training for her return. She'd have taken multiple bumps by that point. Go back and look at any of these documentaries. It's logical. When they train for an in-ring return, they take bumps. They go through the proper precautions. So I would assume if the doctor says that she's cleared, she's cleared. And that's just about it. And it's great news. That it doesn't change anything about the presentation for the AEW Women's Division for me. That still requires immense work. I've said this before. Saraya's a great get for AEW. Her first promo was awful. But she absolutely spearheaded, or certainly started, the women's revolution in WWE, in NXT during her time there. The matches she had with Emma in the developmental brand were tremendous. But at the same time, there was a desire by WWE at the time to present women's wrestling more seriously and become a more important point of the show. That was the point. It was to become more important. It was to be taken more seriously. It was to main event shows, main event pay-per-views. That isn't the case in AEW. It's still one segment on Dynamite per week. That's it. Yeah, you might have a couple of matches on Rampage, but no one watches that show anyway. It's not main eventing TV shows. It's not main eventing pay-per-views. Tony Khan can point out and say, well, St. Patrick's Day Slam and this, that, and the other, but it's far too infrequent and it's not taken seriously. And he can point to the ratings and say, well, the ratings dictate. Well, no, you have to dictate the ratings. You have to tell people a reason to care and invest in these characters, in these performers. You don't tell your audience, oh, this match is only going on for 5 minutes, so you have to care. You have to give the audience a reason to care. Yes, the ratings will dip initially, but they'll come back once they are invested in the characters. That's how it works. So Saraya being cleared is great, but the perception and the desire to have female wrestling main event the show, that has to be the key there. That's how it's going to work. Andrade and Sammy Guevara, of course, they had their backstage brawl this week, or backstage fight, and we kind of touched on this yesterday, but more details have emerged about this. Much more detail has emerged from the Sammy Guevara-Andrade situation, and it would appear there is a good reason why Sammy Guevara was still on the show. Now, according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, they've posted a really interesting report on this. It should be noted that varying accounts will have varying details in a situation like this, but according to Fightful, most of the accounts that they have heard of thus far have indicated that Andrade was indeed the aggressor and Guevara made attempts to not participate in the fight. Many accounts that Fightful have heard indicate that Andrade arrived and, as we spoke about yesterday, had waited to see Sammy Guevara and threw a couple of punches before it was broken up. It should be said that they confirmed what Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez said, that both men had been spoken to and warned about not fighting and had assured management that they wouldn't be fighting. Several talent even said they expected it to be squashed as opposed to the fight. As I mentioned, the Wrestling Observer confirmed these details. A few of the accounts claim that Guevara also shoved Andrade, though that's how the initial information filled in. That side was more in line with what Andrade's side of things were claiming. Since then, much more information has emerged. Of course, Guevara was left on TV. Andrade was sent home. I kind of covered this all yesterday, so I don't want to cover it over again too much. The one thing I will say is that I still think both of them should have been sent home as a message. I think it still shouldn't have escalated to that point. By all accounts, Andrade was waiting for Guevara as he kind of arrived at the arena. There should have been someone from Talent Relations there waiting also as well. Whilst they spoke to them individually ahead of time on the phone, they should have spoken to him on a joint call, and they should immediately, there should have been someone there that ensured when they got to the arena, they were taken to a room, it was figured out. It wasn't. Talent Relations, in my opinion, isn't doing what it should be. Now, when it comes to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, they provided some more internal reaction to this, and they have said that privately, some of the key AEW talent is even more upset with Andrade than would be otherwise because of the timing of the altercation with Sammy Guevara Guevara happening, Andrade being fully aware of it, and how this made AEW look to the public, which is, again, my reaction to it as well, is that I believe that that's the biggest frustration in all of this, is that it's the third incident. It's another black eye. And the perception, publicly at least, I think, of AEW's backstage environment has changed massively in the last couple of months. And this just solidifies that perception. And it just gives people that don't like AEW more ammunition. Now, of course, Andrade was set to face Preston 10 Vance on Rampage tonight. It was going to be a Mask versus Career match. And according to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, the reason Tony Khan booked the match in the first place was because both the company and AEW wanted to take advantage of the publicity from the speculation that he wants to leave. The idea was that the match would give people the idea he was going to be losing and departing AEW, and he even joked he could do that on purpose just so he could get out of his contract. There wasn't much build towards the match, which is why the stipulation took people by surprise when it was announced. However, the belief was that it had to happen this week, as fans would have moved on from the story about Idolo's future very quickly. The angle was all based around social media and the speculation rather than anything on television that would have been a purposeful choice. So, again, ultimately it didn't happen. It didn't happen anyway. But, I mean, with what Andrade's trying to do, clearly, you could argue that he's trying to get released, trying to get out of his contract. Could he have even thrown the match to try and leave? I wouldn't rule out anything at this point, in all actuality. Let's talk about the Dynamite ratings this week. As I mentioned, it was the 3-year anniversary show, and Dynamite is back on track after falling below the 1 million mark last week. WrestleNomics has shared the viewership information for Wednesday night, and the 3-year anniversary episode of Dynamite was watched by an average of 1.038 million viewers, which is up 5% from the previous week. Total viewership was up, but the key demographic number was actually down 3%. This week's episode was watched by 430,000 people aged 18 to 49, which is 13,000 less than the prior week, totaling a 0.33 rating. This happens to be the lowest key demographic number since August 17. Dynamite did rank second among cable originals in the key demographic category as well. Going back a year, Dynamite is down in both categories. The October 6, 2021 episode was watched by 1.053 million viewers, which is only a 1% difference, so it's essentially flat. The key demographic, though, is down 11%. Last year's number came in at a 0.37 rating. And to be fair, Dynamite last week was very close to 1 million. The only reason it wasn't over 1 million viewers was because of the hurricane coverage. So I think they'll be looking at that as, since All Out, they've basically done 1 million viewers every week, which I think they'll be happy with considering the circumstances. The 3-year anniversary show was fine. It'll be interesting to see what they do next week. Of course, they've got their show in Canada, the first show in Canada. I think they'll be hoping for a big reaction to that. But that will be curious nevertheless. But back above 1 million, which AEW will be happy with. Bandido, I mean, the assumption was that he was going to sign with AEW. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. A source now is telling Dave Meltzer that Bandido has yet to sign a deal with AEW. Of course, this comes on the back of Fightful and F4W Online suggesting that he had signed or was about to sign, had agreed terms of All Elite Wrestling, but F4W has since retracted the report. Bandido himself claimed he hadn't signed anything with AEW during a recent interview with Lucha Libre outlet Mass Lucha, while also revealing he had received an offer from WWE. Despite that, Bandido hinted that his signing may be all but a formality, stating that he was leaning towards AEW, while also revealing that Jericho and AEW owner Tony Khan openly campaigned for him to sign with the promotion following his match against Jericho. I still expect Bandido to sign with AEW, it must be said, but WWE, let's face it, a lot of this chaos, not really the CM Punk stuff, you would say, but certainly some of the chaos when it comes to unhappy talent has been stirred up a lot by WWE recently. Make no mistake, WWE reaching out to Swerve Strickland, Malachi Black, Andrade, has caused a lot of, issues for AEW. And can you imagine that you've got this talent has a fantastic match against Chris Jericho. They offer him a contract on the spot, and then he decides to go to WWE. That would be a massive blow, massive blow to AEW. And Bandido would be used well by WWE now. We know that. Triple H is in charge. He's not afraid to push someone like Bandido. So that certainly would be interesting there as well. Jeff Hardy, what's the latest when it comes to Jeff Hardy? There had been a report previously that Jeff Hardy could be returning to the ring soon, but it might not be as soon as people previously thought. According to PW Insider, Hardy is preparing for a pre-trial hearing set to take place later this month regarding his DUI arrest back in June. The report also claims that Hardy is not expected back with AEW until his legal issues are handled, and the company feels confident that Hardy has a handle on his sobriety. Now, as I mentioned, this comes off the back of Matt Hardy teasing that soon we would be getting a new look at a brand new Jeff Hardy on his podcast, but it would appear that any plans for Jeff Hardy to return to AEW are not going to happen anytime soon until his legal issues are sorted and he's back on track with his sobriety, which indeed should be the case. But there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.